In this video, we're going to be looking at how to edit files directly in the command line. It's very possible that you've been doing some coding before, and perhaps you've even used programs like Sublime or Notepad++ or Visual Studio, or perhaps even in MATLAB, their editor, and use that to enter your text of your code. Well, those are all good tools. However, when you're working on a server, you need to be able to work within the confines of that server. If something were to happen and you weren't able to have all of those other fancy tools, how could you then go about editing your files? How could you do your homework? Well, that's what we're going to be learning about today. Now, we've already looked at the ability to create a file with the command called touch, but those files were empty. So we're going to look at this in the command line here, and you'll see here if I type in ls, there are no files present. If I type in touch, and let's just create a file called test, and now I type in ls, there is a file there named test, and if I do ls-l, you'll see that it has a size of 0. That is, there's no bytes that the file contains. If we want to actually put text into this, we need a program to open the file and to edit the contents. The file that we're going to use is called Nano. Now, Nano it has a few features to it, but it's not as full-featured as some other programs that we're going to be using. But I want you to follow along with me and to learn how to use Nano, and I'll explain more why as we get going. The command for Nano is, of course, its name, Nano, N-A-N-O, and we're going to type in the name test because that's the name of the file that we're editing. And when it opens, you see it's very basic, but it allows us to type in something like, hello, and how are you? All these silly things that we tend to type in for test material. Well, let's just go back to the hello. Now, to save it, you actually see a series of commands across the bottom. You see this first one, ~G for get help, a ~O for write out, a ~W for where is. Now, you may be thinking S means save, but Nano, like I said, is a little different. And so in this case, the ~O write out is the save command. So in this case, it's going to be, if you're on a PC, it's going to be the control character, Control-O, and if you're on a Mac, it's the command character, Command-O. So Control-O, and it asks what file name should it write to, and it's already pre-filled in with the name test, and okay, that's good. So I'm just going to hit enter, and now if I exit, as you can see, there's a command there, Control-X, or yes, ~X really, but it's the command key. Command-X on the Mac, Control-X on the Windows. If I press that, I exit it. Now I can show you the contents of this file, if you remember, by using the cat command, C-A-T, and then test, and you'll see that it has hello in it. If I re-enter, that is, if I go back into Nano and re-edit the file, so Nano test, you'll see that it's there, and I can go down and remove the period and do hello world, because, well, in programming, that's one of the phrases that you learn first, hello world, and exclamation point. Again, Control-W for write out. Excuse me, I hit the wrong thing there, hit the wrong command. So you see my commands at the bottom changed, and I can just hit the Control key for cancel and write out Control-O. There we go. Hit enter since the file name is already pre-populated, and now I'm going to exit. And now this time when I cat or print out the contents of the file, test, you see it says hello world. And again, Nano is just a simple tool that you can use to edit programs. Now, why would we want you to use Nano when you've got other better tools at your disposal? Well, that's an important thing to realize, and that is Nano is part of what's called the GNU software project. Now, the GNU software project has been around for since the, I believe, the early 80s, and you can see their website here. GNU, when they created software, they were creating an alternative to the proprietary software of the time. And so it's a collection of small programs that you can use on a computer. And yes, you can get them for Windows, you can get them for Linux, and most importantly, on just about every distribution of Linux that I've seen, it will always contain, by default, the GNU software on it automatically. So some of you may say, well, I can already edit text in the command line using a program like Vim, or VI, or Emacs, or I don't know, take your pick. There's a lot of different ones. But the problem is when you get to a new server, perhaps an unfamiliar server, you may not have access to those programs, and you may not have the administrative rights to install those programs. However, Nano is always installed. It's installed by default on all of these different distributions. So if you are logging into a server, you know that Nano is going to be there. Now, your favorite program may also be there, and you can use that instead in the real world. But if you know how to use Nano, you're never going to be in a bind, so to speak. So for these first few weeks, I specifically urge you, I really want you to only use Nano to edit files. It's not my favorite editor. I only use it when I have to. But as part of your education, we want you to be prepared for whatever you may face in terms of interfacing with computers. Now, Nano, like I said, is really basic, but there's some things that we can do to make it better, make it a little easier to use, and I'll show you those things at this time. The first thing that I want to point out, actually, let me show you what this looks like. So I have an example CPP file, like I was going to do some programming. So let me show you this here. I have a program called start.cpp, and I just copied it over. It doesn't have very much in it. In fact, if I were to print its contents out, you'll see it's a very short file. It just pronounces the word, it works. If I edit this with Nano, so I would type in nano start.cpp, you see that again, it allows me to edit it. I could change it to, it still works, and I could compile it, and yes, it would still work. It's valid syntax. And in fact, right, and exit. But we can make Nano a little easier to work with, and that is by using something called a dot file. Now, dot files are not unique to Nano. Actually, you have a lot of them in your home directory already. When you log in for the first time, dot files are created. Dot files are configuration files that the system uses. It saves your preferences. It saves settings that you set, or in this case, settings that are automatically generated. And programs such as Nano will look for this so-called dot file and pull its settings, its default settings from that. By default, actually in this case, there is no dot file for Nano. So it defaults to one that was created by the whatever administrator set up the system. But you can add your own dot file for Nano. In fact, I've actually created one for you that you can use, but it's pretty long. So the best thing to do would be to download it from a server. And the command is actually pretty long, and you will see it in the description area below the video. But I want to show you where the file is. It is on the internet. It's called a gist. It's just a quick way of me being able to put a lot of information on here and a lot of settings. And again, the command to download this file directly will be in the description area below the video. Let me show you what it looks like. So the command is going to be, let me switch back to this. So the command is going to be wget, and then minus capital O. Now the minus capital O is a command line flag, and we've talked about command line flags, but it's a command line flag that says whatever comes next needs to be the name or where I want the output to be saved. And we're going to say tilde slash, and again tilde means your home directory, you remember the relative path name there, dot nanorc, and that's the name of that configuration file, dot nanorc. And now here comes the long part. wget goes to the internet, it goes to wherever you say, and in this case here's this long URL, and I just pasted it in, and I'm going to hit enter, and it says it downloaded it. You can see that it was saved to my home directory there, and .nanorc. So now let's re-edit that .cpp file. So if I type in nano start.cpp, you see now I have syntax highlighting. It makes it easier for programming to be able to see which is which part. And I can even go into that .nanorc file if I type in nano and the tilde slash .nanorc, and I can see all of the settings. The lines that start with the pound sign, or the hashtag, but it's not a hashtag, it's a pound sign in programming. The lines that start with the pound sign are comments, so they're ignored, but it tells you what the different things are. And so for example, if I didn't want auto indent to be on, I could preface it with a pound sign and it would ignore that setting. I'm going to remove that because I prefer auto indent in this case. And if you scroll through, you'll see all these different settings, including a lot of color settings that you can use, and again, I just encourage you to look through it. So now if we go back, no, I don't want to say the changes in this case. Again, you saw when I was editing the start.cpp, I want to give you a caveat, something to be aware of that might happen, and it trips people up sometimes. Now, before we had the .nanorc file, in fact, let me just show you this. I'm going to remove my tilde slash .nanorc file. And now if I re-edit start.cpp, you see I have the plain text and it's all not fun. If I try to click anywhere, it's just the standard, in this case I'm using putty, it's just the standard behavior of putty. But if I want to type at this point at the cout, if I want to remove the still works, I actually have to move the cursor down to that point and delete the text. Okay, I'm not going to save that. After I have downloaded the .nanorc file and now I edit start.cpp, if I click somewhere, the cursor goes there. It's just a nice feature. However, there's a problem, and that is most people at some point will start double clicking. I want you to see what happens to the color of the text when I double click. So when I double click at this point, excuse me, to a new place, yes. There, the text is actually changing to white. What has happened here is that I'm actually selecting a group of text. And if I now say save this, that is the Control O or Command O write out command, if I say to save it, it says, oh, what file should I save it to? A lot of people will then say, well, the file name is start.cpp. So I type in start.cpp, hit enter, and what it does is it only saves that part of the text that was highlighted in that file name. I just overwrote my original file with this partial content. And yes, I've seen people lose work because they weren't paying attention to the fact that they had selected text instead of just single clicked. How do you get it off? A double click again. Oh, I need to exit out of this from where it's trying to save. Again, the commands are at the bottom, Control C or Command C. And in this case, a double click removes it. And you see now, if I were to try to hit save or write out, the name of the file, start.cpp, is already there. And so in this case, that means that I'm writing the entire file. So there's just something to watch out for. Be aware of double clicking, because that can get you in trouble. And again, you can always tell that you've done that because the color changes to white as you highlight the text, instead of having the syntax highlighting. So the only other thing I want to say about Nano is this first command, the Control-G or Command-G for get help. If I press that, you'll see actually a lot of information about different shortcuts that you can use. There's a lot more than are on the immediate screen, and you can scroll through and read through. Nano actually does do a lot. It's not my favorite editor, but it is powerful in its own way. And it's worth it to read through this to see what the different possibilities are. Yes, you can use Google, you can use Bing, you can use a search engine to find out more about it. But the most important part about all of this that I've said is that this is just a tool that we want you to know how to use. It doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you have to love it. It doesn't mean you have to use it from now on. It just means that we want you to be prepared in whatever environment you may go into. And so yes, we do want you to use Nano for these first few weeks, get a feel for it, learn how to use it, and then move on to another editor, learn how to use it, get familiar with it. But for starting out, let's use Nano.